Thanks, Gabi.
Welcome to my virtual free comic book day. If we could start off, if you could tell my fine fans and your fine fans who you are and what you do.
I'm Tim Seeley. I'm a writer and artist. I work for pretty much everybody. I think I'm probably most well known for Hack Slash and Revival and Nightwing. Yeah, probably Hack Slash and Revival. And yeah, right in order. There you go. And probably Nightwing and Grayson. And then I'm working on a current book called Money Shot, which is about space porn. So
Yes.
There you go.
Excellent. So is there anything you want to start talking about, or do you want to jump in with my customers' questions?
Hit me. I'm ready.
All right. So the first question that everyone always wants to know is, what was the first comic you read or that you remember being important to you?
It was, I believe it was issue Amazing Spider-Man, and I'm going to screw up the number because I've been screwing this up lately. I think it's 239 or 230, somewhere in there. It was an issue of Spider-Man. Well, if I go back even farther than that, technically the first one was the Master Universe comics that came with the figures. I got that when I was 4 or 5, I think. And that's what made me get the Spider-Man. So technically He-Man won by a little bit, but it was just a mini comic. But yeah, I got obsessed with comics from there. My mom taught me to read those Spider-Man comics that I had, Spider-Man and Hulk. So been a part of my life for a long time. When I was in 4th grade, I did my report on careers about being an artist. And I and all sort of stuff. So this has been in the works for a while.
Well, that leads to our next question, which is, when did you first know you wanted to be a comic artist? But yeah, I guess that
very early. And my dad, when we were kids, and my grandma, a lot of people in my family would just sit and draw nobody was trained, but my dad would just sit and draw like trucks and stuff, and my grandma would draw little faces and everything. And so as kids, we were always really into drawing, just, watching people draw. So I think, when I found out comics were drawn, that led immediately to a fascination with that. And then, it was early 5, 6, somewhere in there. And I was making comics, when I was 6, 7 years old with my brother. So I never really thought about anything else, which is too bad. I wish I had at least considered something like doctor or lawyer or corrupt politician, so I could have really banked some cash. But this is where I am, and I get to do comics every day, and I'm still doing it at 43.
Excellent. Nice. So where a lot of your comics have kind of a horror bent, where did that come from? Like, you start with He-Man and Spider-Man and then evolve into some of, the scary, horrific stuff that exists in
I think the monsters were always a big thing for us, going back to Masters of the Universe. But even before that, my brothers and I were always into, the Universal horror movies. My dad would let us watch those because they weren't too scary, and especially the Three Stooges Universal horror movies, we would watch those. And so we always liked monsters, and there used to be this series of books called Monsterverse that you could get at like the library, and it had these. They would just do book retellings of like Godzilla and all that sort of stuff, and we loved them. I remember one year we checked out the Godzilla versus King Kong one straight every week for like a year. So we were just always into monsters. So by the time I was a teenager, I saw Alien and Predator and all that sort of stuff, and then the slasher movies because they had boobies in them. But yeah, like the slasher thing, I think always fascinated me because it was, horror, but it was also, kind of exploitive and just ridiculous. So I kind of got into those. So yeah, like the B movie, the horror kind of stuff was just all through my teenage years. And my dad was always into that stuff. He used to buy Vampirella magazine, and every once in a while he'd pick up Fangoria or something like that too. So we just always had that stuff around.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it was kind of a natural extension. And then when I first started writing comics, I was busy, and also just I was young and I wanted to have fun. So I didn't want to do a comic that I had to research a lot. So one of the impetuses for High Slash was just, I knew it already. I didn't have to do any research. And so, that kind of building off my strengths was just that I figured that'd be the best way to do a new series. So.
Mm-hmm. And where did the idea for it to be the final girl being the heroine, kind of? Like, where did that idea come from?
So the original idea for Hack Slash was, I mean, I've told the story probably a million times. I'm not even sure it's true anymore. I told a bunch, but I was sick over Halloween, and I had like just a high fever, and I was taking all this cold medicine, and I ended up watching on before The Walking Dead. AMC used to do these horror movie marathons. They do it for like 3 days in a row, and I just sat on the couch and I didn't sleep, and I was so tired, but I just watched like, I don't know, 10 slasher movies in a row, and that idea was, wait, these are all in the same place. Like, this is in the same world, and Haddonfield is down the highway from Crystal Lake and all whatever. Mm-hmm. And so then the idea became, well, who lives in that world? And so Cassie was born out of that, I think. And obviously, like, it had been sort of done to some degree out before, and people pointed out, Buffy is kind of the same evolution. Although at the time I hadn't seen Buffy, so I was thinking more of like sleazy, sort of 80s kind of 70s slasher stuff, instead of like classic monsters. But and then Cassie came out of that. I think my original conception of her was like a Suicide Girl model with the personality of Ash Williams. It was kind of my original. And then she kind of became her own thing. And Vlad, I don't know where he's named after my grandfather, who was a Czechoslovakian immigrant. So I kind of gave Vlad some of that stuff. I don't know, but he kind of ended up being like nice Jason Voorhees. That was kind of the growth of him, was like, if Jason turned out okay, instead of really pissed off.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what about books like Revival?
I mean, I tried to, with all the creator-owned stuff I do, a big part of it is trying to do something that I'm affectionate for, because I know I'm going to be in there for a while, so I have to pick a subject I like. Mm-hmm. So, Revival I can do, Hack Slash I could do slashers. I knew I could do it forever because I love that stuff. And so Revival, I picked the subject of my hometown because I knew it, and I knew I could do it justice, and I knew I could live with it for a while. And I could write off my gas when I went and visited my parents. So that was part of it too. But there was like a few different ideas that Revival came from. And one of them, I wanted to do a crime story set in my hometown because as a kid, I had seen lots of weird crime stuff, and I kind of wanted to do stories about that. And then I had a separate idea about the dead coming back and just going back to work. And so somehow that got combined into one story with the help of Mike Norton. So it was just kind of a way to create a whole world and then put characters in it, and just have them bump into each other. So I think that was, and the character of M was kind of inspired by a character I had done a comic of when I was in high school, which is kind of, like the Crow in lingerie, I guess. So I think it's all, just a whole bunch of things that were out in my brain just got synthesized into one 48 issues story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I read this book when I was in upstate New York, in a town called Malone. Okay. That could be this place. And in the middle of nowhere in the snow, and I read that, and I was like, oh, I made a mistake. I should not have read this here.
Well, the thing what's funny is people sometimes ask me if the town in Revival is made up, which I think is funny because no, I grew up there. Or they say, is it actually this town? And I'm like, no, they're just all the same. Yeah. If you were, I mean, not in a negative way, it's just the way sort of rural American towns work. They kind of, and every town has, it's funny, now that I look at Revival, of course we had like the right-wing guy who's like, don't step on my liberties, I don't care about your health, and all that sort of stuff, like, which obviously we're seeing now in the news, but a lot of it is every town has those guys. Every town has the guy flying the flag with the "Don't tread on me" and with the big pile of guns, and that character was based on a real guy in my town from when I was a kid. So a lot of that stuff is seems to be a cycle in America.
Mm-hmm. So if you had to pick one character that you love the most, who is it?
Of mine or
any characters? I would imagine it would be one of yours, but.
And again, I mean, that's tough. I think you love them all because they're your kids, sort of in a weird way, but they also piss you off because it's
Your
frustrating
kid.
to come up with new stuff for them and, try to maintain that excitement. I guess, overall, like Cassie has done me pretty good. I think she, it's for some reason, it's the one people still like the most, even if I do, Batman or whatever, Wolverine, it doesn't matter. People still like me for that character, I think, more than other stuff for whatever reason.
Mhm.
So maybe it's just more personal or something. People can smell it on there.
Mhm.
But yeah, you love them all, and sometimes I hate Cassie because I wrote a story about it recently in the 15th anniversary about sometimes I hate her, just because you kind of feel like you'll never escape it to some degree. I guess I think all creators probably feel that way. But yeah, I don't know, it's tough. And then I guess of characters that aren't mine and that are comic book characters. I don't know. They change all the time, but I don't know. Let's see. I do have like an unusual amount of affection for Ash from. He's not a comic book character, but he's a character that is in comics. But Ash Williams from Evil Dead and Army of Darkness. For some reason, I could write or draw that character every day for the rest of my life and probably be happy. I don't know why. It's just I think he's such a great idiot.
Are there any mainstream comic characters that you're just dying to write? And like they show up and they're like, write this, and you would be like, oh my God, yes.
I've done most of the ones I wanted to do. I've got to do them a few times, but not the way I want to. With Superman, I would love to do more with him. I got to write a couple shorts with him, and I got to write the Injustice Master Universe, but he was bad. So that wasn't quite as fun. Well, it was fun, but it wasn't what I was thinking. So Superman, and then I should probably do Spider-Man at some point. I've written him a little bit, but not very much. I drew him for a couple issues, but I should probably do Spider-Man at some point before I'm done with this job.
Can you kind of talk about the difference between when you're working on your own stuff and when you're working on more like the big two or more
Yeah.
I don't know what you call that stuff.
Yeah, I guess the corporate comics, I guess, is the better way to say it. For me, it's mostly, it's a matter of which part is more difficult and which is more easy. With your own stuff, you're free, obviously. You can do your own thing. Then the downside is you have to make everything up. A lot of work. So you have to know all the details because nothing of that has been created already. So I'm working on a new number 1 today. It's like, I got to figure out all this background and location stuff that I didn't think of, and I got to know where the guy lives. I got to know what his house looks like. So you have to do all this additional stuff. And obviously, when you're doing a corporate thing, you already know that, right? You know, Peter Parker has an Aunt May, and you know where he went to college, and you know all these details, and all you have to do is supply your take on it. So that part is easier. But the hard part is obviously that people can tell you did it wrong. Whereas with your own stuff, you can decide on your own. And so, if you turn in a Nightwing script and the company says, hey, this is not what we're thinking, we'd like something else. Yeah, then you have to think of new ways to do it. And you have to, even if you vehemently disagree, it's their job. So that part is a lot harder, and rewrites and all that sort of thing. Especially sometimes when you come down to it, you end up with something that you don't even recognize, which can be kind of disheartening. So, there's advantages to both. I usually try to balance one or two at the same time, so I, can accommodate the downsides and the upsides of the other.
Mm-hmm. So in the whole process of drawing, what is your favorite part? Like, is there one part of it that you love more than others, or?
Being done is my favorite, I think, because it's more fun to have drawn than to draw. I don't know. I used to really just love noodling. I think I still like that. Just, because the hard part is laying it out and figuring it out and all the structure and, the body weight and composition. But once you've got that done and you're just inking, it's kind of like, you get to turn off to some degree. You have to can think about what you're doing, but parts of it can just be sort of a zone out, which is nice.
Mm-hmm. So a question from a customer here. Cassie Hack has been killing slashers for a while. If you could save one movie franchise slasher from her and Vlad, who would it be?
I mean, I've got to do a few of them, but we never got to do Jason or Freddy. So that's a big one. I feel like I don't know how we're gonna ever get that done, but I would love to have done that. And then if there was ever a way I could figure out Scream, I would have done something with Scream, Ghostface. I feel like you could really match them up interesting. And I mean, Michael, I'd do them all if I could. I would get to them all eventually. So, and a couple of the stories that exist, we started out as pitches for crossovers. So like the Hack Slash story, My First Maniac, was originally a pitch for Michael Myers, and Cassie versus Michael, and I think we had there's another one that we did that I had to change it to somebody else. We did one for Freddy and Jason, and that we used parts of that for the Ash versus Hack Slash crossover. So pieces of stuff got reused that were pitches for other stuff that didn't go through.
Mm-hmm. How does it work? Like if you want to put, for instance, Michael Myers in your Hack Slash world, is there a bunch of hoops you have to jump through, or do you just make it different enough that we know who it is, but you don't actually call him Michael Myers?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how official you want to get. Obviously, I can do a parody and get away with it. We did a bunch in Hack Slash. But, to do it official and you want to have the logo on there and you want to be able to say it's Michael Myers. I mean, it's harder when it's corporate. So, for instance, when we did Reanimator, that's not owned by a corporation. It's owned by a guy. So that was so much easier. And I knew Stuart Gordon, the director, and I knew Brian Usna through him, so I was able to contact those guys and just ask if we got the rights. Same for, Hatchet, when we used Victor Crowley. I know Adam Green, the director, so I just called him and he said, sure. But things that are owned by corporations, like, Freddy and Jason are owned by it ends up being Warner Brothers. And then, Halloween is owned by an estate of the Akkad family. And so you have to do deals usually. And the only time we really made it work was for Chucky, and they were super cool about it. And we had no problem whatsoever. But the other times were really difficult. We just never got, we couldn't make the deals work, or it took too long, or, cost too much, or whatever. So, I mean, I would try anything just for the hell of it, but it's a lot easier when it's a person. I mean, Vampirella is easy because it's owned by Dynamite, and I know Nick, so I can just say, hey, can I use Vampirella? And I'll say, here's what you need to do if you want to use Vampirella. So I'm able to get away with stuff if I know people, but it's harder when it's, lawyers. When there's lawyers involved, then it's almost impossible.
Mm-hmm. So do you still love horror as a genre? I mean, do you still go watch all the horror movies, or do you think how do you think it's changed, and is it better or worse?
It's better. I mean, there's the last 5 years and maybe 10 of horror have been great ever since, Blumhouse has brought back so much great stuff. There's so much indie stuff that's really good. I think horror's been going through a renaissance for at least the last 5 years, maybe more than that. I mean, horror never goes away. That's the cool thing. And I don't recall a time where I was like, oh man, there wasn't anything good this year. There's always something. There's always somebody doing something cool, interesting, retro, innovative, whatever. But yeah, this year, I don't know. Well, in the last year, I've seen some great stuff that I loved. And I have Shudder, so I get to watch a lot of stuff. But the movie Bliss by Joe Bagos is incredible. I thought that was great. He also did a movie called VFW I really liked. Yeah, man, there's tons of stuff. With the baby, we watch a little bit less of it than we used to. Because it's just hard to put on a movie. We watch a lot of TV, I think, because it's just shorter and we can control it a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I always like horror stuff. I'm always looking. The only conventions I go to for fun are horror conventions. I don't set up. I just go to shop and meet people and buy posters and shit. So yeah, and I've been trying to go backwards and watch stuff I missed. So I've been doing Hammer movies because I hadn't seen very many of those, and there's always something. There's just so much good stuff.
Mm-hmm. So you went to Crypticon a bunch of years in a row, right?
Yeah, Yeah, I know those guys. I used to work with them at Dead Dog Comics when they had a cotton company.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I do CryptCon and yeah, I'll do any horror convention that'll have me basically. So for me, I mean, Comic Con's is business, but sometimes it's for fun too. But I'll definitely do a horror con. You know, we have quite a few in the Midwest, especially around Chicago. Chicago has a strong tradition of horror stuff because of the late night horror hosts like Sven Gulli and stuff. So there's always something going around. Well, before the virus, there was always cool stuff going around here.
Do you think you're going to do a horror movie set with the virus or a horror comic?
No, fuck no. I already did. One, Revival is pretty much the same story, except not as boring. Well, I mean, this is just boring. It's just so fucking boring. And I just think about it again after this. Like once, you know, in 2022, when we finally have a virus and everybody's not going to, I just don't ever want to think about this ever again. So I know people are going to do it, and somebody will do a good job, but it's just tedium. I mean, it's long, slow horror, which is, just, you know, not in a good George Romero
way.
way.
I missed you.
Oh, am I still here?
Oh, there you are. Okay, you're back. You went away for a second.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. I missed your answer to the long, slow tedium. George Romero.
Like I was saying, this is like it's like a boring version of a Romero movie. Like it's none of the good parts. It's just stuck in your house and you have to watch TV and you get to watch your leadership be terrible. Like that's it. There's nothing good about it.
Fair enough. Let me see if I have a couple more questions for you here from customers. Oh man, I already went through all of this. When you work on your art, what is your favorite medium to use, and any tips for our up and coming artists?
I mean, I've tried other medium, and I'm not a painter. I'm not really an artist. I'm a comic book artist. So I just like using ink. I just like using. I love slinging ink. That's my main thing. I usually do layouts in blue pencil, and then I can erase that. So I'll just draw it with blue, and then I'll ink it. I never use lead pencils anymore. Everything is done just, you know, with a blue pencil, an ink, and an eraser. I use Photoshop a lot, and I use Procreate, but you know, I never use Paint unless it's like sometimes I repaint toys or something or models or something 3D. But I draw so much, and I have drawn so much that I can't do art as a hobby. At least I can't do 2D art as a hobby. I just nope. So. Yeah, so I'm pretty simple. I mean, I'm a cartoonist. I'm not a very good painter, and I don't know if I ever would be. So I haven't messed with it as much as I probably should. So give me some ink and some paper, and I'll sling.
Nice. What have you kind of seen? How have you seen the comic industry change over the last 5 or 10 years since you've been doing this?
Oh man, well, I've been doing this for 20, so. It's changed drastically, I would say, mostly for the better. Well, sometimes, but I think the problem is that the way it's changed negatively is that we haven't done a good job of bringing in new readers. We've completely abandoned kids, at least on the Wednesday storefront level. I mean, obviously, Dogman and Raina Tegelmeyer, they're killing it, and kids are reading comics, but they're just not reading comics that we make. So I think we have to figure out that. So I think that's a bad change. But the sort of spread into all these different genres, that's great. I mean, you know, when I started this, it was pretty much all superhero stuff, a few horror books, and maybe 2 or 3 sci-fi books. And you know, unless something was licensed, you never got a fantasy book or anything. And now, you know, there's a book for every reader, if not 2 or 3 books for every reader. And there's, you know, a lot of innovative stuff done with create your own stuff. And, you know, I think this is probably the best time to be someone who's a one-stop shop that can do their own comics and if you can do image or any of that sort of thing. But yeah, I feel like there's kind of a stagnation as far as the superhero stuff. And, you know, it's kind of a lost opportunity. We have Avengers Endgame is like the biggest movie ever, and try to sell anybody at a, you know, Avengers comic. I don't know why we haven't been able to take advantage of that. I think it's just too dense with stuff, or we've kind of pushed people away from that kind of material. But yeah, I mean, and the influx of women readers is great, and such a welcome change. I think the current number is like 41% of comic readers are women, which, you know, in the darkest days it was like 10 to 15%. So that's great. So yeah, I think we've expanded, but we've somehow sort of lost the ability to get the general population in the same way that a movie of the same characters can.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, my computer just gave me some weird note. So what would you tell people that are up and coming?
I mean, I teach classes in cartooning, so I have to tell kids this all the time. And the thing I kind of say is, you know, this is the best time for you to promote yourself. It's super easy to do a comic and just put it on the web, you know, but it's also, there's a lot of people doing it, so you're yelling in a field with a bunch of other people. So, you know, when I broke in or tried to break in, you had to go to a comic convention, you had to print comics, you had to hope someone would read it. You had to spend thousands of dollars to print a bunch of crap. You don't have to do that. The barrier to entry is so low, but there's so little barrier that it's not as prohibitive as it used to be. So, I mean, if people want to do comics, I think just make some. You have to make them. No one can tell that you can make them unless you've made a whole bunch of them. And especially now, you know, when anybody gets into business with you, they want to know that you can do all these things and they don't have to hold your hand. So show them, you know, do everything you can. And it's weird. I don't see a lot of people like printing out comics and going to cons and selling them. I see a lot of people print out prints, but they don't do comics. And I don't know if that's because everybody who wants to work in comics has kind of switched to digital, or because the kids who are doing that stuff don't care about print at all. So it's one of the two.
We see a lot of that too, because we host a lot of like graphic novel competitions and stuff like that, and we see a lot of them do it on the computer, like to be read on the computer and then printed out for their entry instead of the opposite.
Definitely, yeah. I totally get it. They don't, you know, they live in a world that's full of comics and they love comics. They don't come to our side of the business, and that's the fault of the industry. You know, we didn't offer them something to read 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and thus we're not harvesting the dividends now. You know, so that has to change, I think. But I mean, you would know that. You have a store. You know that better than anybody. It's, you know, it's just every once in a while it happens, and when I see, you know, teenage boys, I hardly ever see teenage boys reading American comics, but when I do, I'm like, there we go. You know, they usually read manga, or they usually, you know, everybody wants the, you know, full story, a graphic novel rather than a monthly. So I think that's a big challenge for comics in general.
Yeah, I agree. I wish there was a little more, you could read just the issue and then have the whole story later, you know, like,
yeah.
You could read this and have it be whole, but if you put it all together, it's better, but it's not lacking just one comic.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also just, you know, we kind of come from a place where comics were, you know, one issue was a story, and now nobody does that. Everybody does 6, and so if you pick up the third part of some story, you're kind of like, oh, you know, I mean, I know when I was a kid, it didn't bother me to be like part 2 of 2, but, you know, I think people now they just don't like it. They want the complete thing. They're impatient, and they're used to having things at their fingertips. So why would they sit around for this, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, they binge watch things.
Yeah.
Comics is not really any different for a lot of people.
Right, exactly. So it's like some way to do these things, you know, that are both interesting as a one-off, but also part of something so that you can keep people to it. And they figured that out in the 60s and 70s, and somehow we forgot. So that'd be a way to go back.
I'd like that. So our final question, what is your favorite breakfast?
Oh, man. That changes all the time, but I would say in general, I'm such a, like, I like to just go to Starbucks. I like to get my chai latte, and I get one of those Starbucks sausage breakfast sandwiches. It's the best thing on earth. When I was doing so many conventions, it was always the thing I could go to. Like I was wake up in the morning, go to the hotel lobby, and have my standard breakfast, and then it's not very good for you, and it's pretty fatty. And now that I can't go to any Starbucks, I'm missing it like crazy. So now, you know, I probably lost 5 pounds because I'm not eating it, but oh man, do I miss it? Do I miss it?
Is that the first thing you're going to do when you get out of your house? Go to
No, the
Starbucks?
first thing I'm doing is go to the bar.
Well, excellent. Well, I just want to say thank you again for being a part of our Free Comic Day. Hopefully this will be good and successful, and we can incorporate it in other years instead of a need, just have it be kind of a fun want.
Yeah.
But the idea of my holiday being gone was just more than I could handle.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, this was a good idea, and I hope, you know, this works and it works for other people as well. So good.
So. I'm sorry I interrupted. I didn't mean to.
No, that's okay. So good thinking and well done and good luck.
Thank you. I will probably talk to you or see you at a convention at some point soon.
Let's hope.
See you later.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.